The Subcommittee on Oversight, Management, and Accountability will come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to receive testimony on the fiscal year 2020 DHS Management Directorate budget request. Good afternoon and welcome. I know we're just coming from votes, so we'll be having more people come in as we proceed, but I want to make sure we have a lot to discuss, so I want to get started as soon as possible. The hearing today will examine the President's budget request for the Department of Homeland Security's Management Directorate. DHS management may not grab headlines like Secret Service, Coast Guard, Border Patrol, and other operational components, but the men and women who staff the department's front office are every bit as important to the vision and direction of the DHS enterprise. From budgeting to procurement and human resources to information technology, the Management Directorate provides the structure that's needed for DHS to be an effective and efficient organization. The President's proposed budget seeks nearly $1.6 billion for the Management Directorate in fiscal year 2020. This funding would allow the Chief Readiness Support Officer to continue to consolidate department personnel at the St. Elizabeth's campus, the largest construction project in the Washington metro since the Pentagon was built during World War II. The budget would give the Chief Financial Officer additional resources to overhaul the department's woefully outdated financial systems, so that, from an accounting standpoint at least, DHS components can work from a common operating picture. The budget also proposes funding for new tools that the Chief Human Capital Officer could use to recruit and retain top cybersecurity talent. No small task for the department that's competing against other federal agencies and tech companies in Silicon Valley. All of these projects are worthy initiatives that deserve federal funding. But as the Government Accountability Office, GAO, has identified over the years, a number of existing programs and projects with large budget requests have been plagued by lengthy delays and repeated cost overruns spanning multiple budget cycles. The St. Elizabeth's project, for instance, was initially set for completion in 2016. Now, after more than $2 billion has been spent, we're told that it won't be finished until 2026 at the earliest, 10 years behind schedule. The department's financial systems modernization has faced similar challenges. Original cost estimates for upgrades at the three operational components, the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office, the Transportation Security Administration, and Coast Guard, were pegged at $90 million. That work is still not complete. FSM faces additional delays as a result of the recent government shutdown, and the administration is now asking for another $120 million in FY 2020. We see the same story with the department's Human Resources Information Technology, HRIT program, as an investment that began in 2003 and has made limited progress over the past 15 years. DHS has requested another $10 million for HRIT in the FY 2020 budget proposal. I don't want to discredit these projects or their importance, but I would like to see evidence that the department has learned from its past mistakes and is better positioned in the future. I'm also concerned that the department continues to operate without its Quadrennial Homeland Security Review, or QHSR, which is now 15 months overdue. While I understand that the Management Directorate is not responsible for its delivery to Congress, I wonder how it plans for the department's future and proposes a budget without a vision for the agency set forth in a QHSR. To both of our witnesses, I thank you for your time and your testimony. Mr. Fulgham, I understand that you will be leaving the department this summer. On behalf of this committee, I want to thank you for your service to DHS and to our country over the past 6.5 years. Your departure speaks to the challenges the department continues to face in terms of unity, vision, and morale. As we move forward, I welcome any ideas you have for improving cohesion across the department and strengthening the DHS's key management functions. And I look forward to a fruitful discussion with you this afternoon. We're going to be joined by the chair later, so I will save that recognition for later. Other members of the committee are reminded that under the committee rules, opening statements may be submitted for the record. I welcome our panel of witnesses and thank them for joining us today. Our first witness is Mr. Chip Fulgham, who serves as the Deputy Undersecretary for Management for the Department of Homeland Security. Mr. Fulgham has served in many senior leadership roles since joining the department in 2012. In his current role, along with the Undersecretary for Management, he oversees all aspects of the department's management programs, including financial, human capital, information technology, procurement, security, and asset management. Next, we have Next, we have Mr. Chris Curry, who is a director in the Government Accountability Office's Homeland Security and Justice team. Mr. Curry has joined GAO in 2002 and currently leads the agency's work on management, national preparedness, and emergency management issues, including efforts to strengthen DHS management functions. Without objection, the witness's full statements will be inserted into the record. I now ask each witness to summarize his statements for 5 minutes, beginning with Mr. Fulgham.
Good afternoon, Chairmanwoman Torres Small and Ranking Member Crenshaw, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss management's FY20 budget request. It's a privilege for me to sit alongside Chris Curry of GAOA, someone who I've worked closely with over the last few years. We deeply appreciate the work that they do each and every day for us. As I often say to GAO, GAO is like a personal trainer to me. I may not always like the workout, but the result always makes us better. That's clearly evidenced by GAO's most recent GAO high-risk report, which shows management functions as the only high-risk areas to meet the majority of the criteria for removal. We've now fully or mostly addressed 21 of the 30 outcomes and continue to make good progress. Leadership remains steadfast in its commitment to get off the GAO high-risk list. Our 20 budget request supports the priorities of the department built around 3 simple goals: deliver excellence, enable the mission, and foster innovation. We do this by driving efficiency, strong stewardship, strengthening our acquisition oversight, and leveraging the department's buying power. We built an integrated framework across all lines of business to do this. I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to highlight a few of those initiatives that are in our budget request. Good stewardship starts with strong internal controls, reliable financial reporting, and modern financial systems. I'm proud to say that the department earned its 6th straight clean opinion in its 15-year history this past year. We continue to strengthen our internal controls over financial reporting, and we are the only department required by law to get a clean opinion over those internal controls. We've driven our material weaknesses down from 10 in 2008 to 2 today, with a plan to clear those by 2020. This continued success depends on a modernized financial system. Since our cutover from IBC in 2017, we've hit every milestone, and CWMD is now up and running in our environment. As you stated, regrettably, while the shutdown has unavoidably impacted the program, we still expect full functionality of the system to deliver in the second quarter of 2020, vice quarter 1. We continue our continued sustained efforts to mature the department's acquisition process, to deliver capability, and to continue to make improvements. Our JRC is operational. All programs have approved baselines and cost estimates. We have increased our program reviews. We've developed better performance metrics, and now we have an acquisition program health assessment. We've improved our cost estimating process and now have a strategic sourcing vehicle available for all components. We remain focused on delivering a modern and reliable HR system. Our approach to HR system remains the same. Strong departmental governance. We need to drive data consistency and policy consistency. And when we update and modernize our systems, we need to make sure we use an enterprise shared service approach that makes both operational and business sense, all the while reducing redundancy, which we have continued to do. We remain laser focused on improving our IT to modernize our aging infrastructure. Cybersecurity remains a full contact sport for us, and we're continuing to deploy CDM, Windows 10, and a variety of tools to improve our posture. Our SOC optimization initiative will deliver consistent policy, tools, and ConOps for the 17 SOCs that operate within the department, and ultimately we'll look to co-locate those SOCs. We'll continue to push for data center consolidation and look for additional savings, as well as push to get to the cloud. Our budget includes $224 million for the outfitting portion to build a state-of-the-art cybersecurity and infrastructure protection facility on the St. East campus as we continue to build out that campus. We're excited to report that we began to move there on Monday. I was one of the first ones there. So far, so good. The secretary will be there in 2 weeks, and we'll finish that move by the end of this month. We stay focused on our larger NCR consolidation project and our field efficiency initiatives nationwide to meet mission needs, look for federal space wherever possible, co-locate shared services, and look for long-term lease, all the while reducing costs. Finally, none of this is possible without the men and women who serve in the management directorate and throughout our functional lines of business in the department. We will continue to invest in our people. Chairmanwoman Tora Small, thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. I now recognize Mr. Curry to summarize his statements for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Torres Small, Congressman Higgins, Congresswoman Titus. Thank you. It's always an honor to appear before this committee, and I'm pleased to be here to talk about GAO's work on high-risk issues and DHS management. So GAO placed DHS on the high-risk list in 2003, right when the department opened its doors. And the reason we did that was really two things. First of all, just the massive challenge of trying to combine 22 separate agencies. Some of those agencies had big management challenges in and of themselves even before that time, into one functioning department. The other reason is obviously that the impacts and the implications for national security were huge too. So today, 16 years later, I'm happy to report that there has been tremendous progress. And I want to start out by just talking about the department's leadership on this. At GAO, we manage 30 high-risk areas across government, from defense programs to DHS to healthcare. There is not a department that's more committed to addressing high-risk issues than DHS, and part of that has to do with their leadership, including Mr. Fulgham. They have a very humble, committed approach to this rather than a defensive posture, and that makes all the difference in the world. I also want to say that the committee's oversight of this is huge too. What we see at GAO across our high-risk areas we monitor is that when there's strong congressional oversight and legislation, these areas tend to get fixed much quicker. So I think that's very important to say as well. So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about the progress they've made in some areas, and then just move on to some of the areas that are keeping them on the high-risk list. So we and DHS basically have agreed on 30 individual performance measures. These are the goalposts, if you will, on what it's going to take for DHS to get off the high-risk list. We meet twice a year and also quarterly to talk about the progress in these areas. So far, DHS has addressed 17 of these 30 areas, and they are on their way to addressing many more or have initiated all of them. We're down to some of the really challenging issues, though, and that's what's keeping them on the high-risk list. So I want to talk about some of those. First is human capital management. Over the years, DHS has made tremendous progress in bringing together a lot of its personnel and human capital systems. Some of those were legacy systems from agencies that existed or even didn't exist before DHS was formed, and has done a great job doing that. However, as you know, the committee knows, and legislation was introduced recently on this, morale continues to be a huge issue for DHS. I know it's a frustration of their management. There has been some uptick and some increases in the last couple years, but they still ranked last among large to very large agencies across the government. So there absolutely needs to be continued focus and effort on that. It's not too big of a challenge to address. We just have to keep at it. The second piece is acquisitions. When the department was formed, what we saw was very little discipline and oversight mechanisms across the department. The components of the department were off acquiring their own goods, there was no integrated approach across the department. Since that time, that has been changed. There's discipline processes, there are directives and guidance and oversight mechanisms. What we need to see moving forward, though, is we need to see programs successfully undergo those processes and be held accountable. For example, we need to see cost estimation and schedule estimation improve at the department still. When we last looked at the major acquisitions at DHS last year, over half of them were still over cost and over schedule. And what happens is that creates a budget problem and budget shortfall for DHS in future years. If they don't estimate correctly how much something's going to cost, then they don't know how much to ask for it, and then later on they don't have the money to cover it. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. The last piece I'll talk about is financial management, which Chip talked about a lot in his opening statement. I think it's amazing that DHS is able to get six straight clean audit opinions. That's a major accomplishment, especially considering a lot of the manual intervention that is still required because of the state of some of their financial management systems. I think it shows you how hard they're working to address their issues. But they're going to have to continue to modernize their financial management systems. Some of them, including FEMA's, are over 25 years old. And they're going to have to work on getting a clean audit opinion, as he said, on internal controls. So that's all I wanted to talk about in my opening statement. I appreciate the discussion and any questions.
I thank all of the witnesses for their testimony, and I'll remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the panel. I'll now recognize myself for questions. Secretaries prior to Secretary Nielsen had visions for integrating and unifying the department, which I think is critical because of the challenges that were referenced by the panel. For example, Secretary Napolitano coined One DHS, and Secretary Johnson developed the Unity of Effort initiative. It's unclear whether Secretary Nielsen's vision for the Secretary Nielsen's vision for the department is, and whether the resources are being adequately allocated to enhance integration and unification. So, Mr. Fulgram, what has Secretary Nielsen conveyed to you as her vision for integrating and unifying the department, and how is this vision being implemented through the Management Directorate's budget request?
So I'd start by saying the Secretary has been very clear to us that the Unity of Effort initiative started under the previous administration has continued, which really means strong centralized leadership and direction. The processes that were put in place in 2014, 2015, and 2016 have continued. We have a strong executive corporate structure with a Deputies Management Action Group that looks at all resourcing decisions as we go through the programming and budget process. We have a strong acquisition review board that has continued. We've stood up and maintained a joint requirements council to make sure, to Chris's point, that we get investments right up front. So there's strong governance first and foremost. Within the Management Directorate, we continue to push strong CXO integration in a variety of different ways. We have demonstrated that and continue to demonstrate that, and that's foundational to what we are doing as a department. We've got to make sure that while we talk very good this way, we've got to make sure that we continue to talk across the lines of business and work together.
Thank you, and I would just emphasize that reflecting that in budget requests is important, and then delivering on those goals. Mr. Curry, I deeply appreciated your clear-eyed assessment and acknowledgement of the tremendous progress that has occurred. So DHS management continues to be on GAO's high-risk list since 2003, and that has proven helpful in holding department leadership accountable for improvement. Mr. Curry, what could Congress do to continue supporting the needed change at DHS and holding the department accountable for its results?
I think you said it in your opening statement. I mean, DHS management is not a headline-grabbing issue, but it's really critical. What we're talking about is bringing the department together and making it function well. And it's not just management. This translates down to the mission side. So I think hearings like this, congressional oversight where this issue is called out, continuing to focus on their high-risk areas, and also codifying a lot of the progress that's been made or the things that haven't been done yet in legislation is huge as well.
A lot of money has been spent trying to modernize outdated financial systems, and we're not seeing the results yet. For example, DHS has spent $52 million trying to buy one single system for the department before then abandoning that concept. Since 2012, DHS has been focused on modernizing financial management systems for three components: countering weapons of mass destruction office, the Transportation Security Administration, and the U.S. Coast Guard. And we've had limited success there. The department is now requesting $120 million for financial modernization in FY 2020. Mr. Fulgham, what is your timeline for finalizing the system for modernization for CWMD, TSA, and the Coast Guard?
So CWMD is up and operational. It's been operational since 2016, I believe. As for TSA and the Coast Guard, our original schedule was to have TSA up and running at the end of 2019 and the Coast Guard up in 2020. Given the shutdown and the impacts of the shutdown, that's forced in all likelihood, a one-quarter slip in delivering that full functionality. So what that means very quickly, ma'am, is that we would be forced to migrate TSA in the middle of a fiscal year with thousands of open transactions. That creates too much audit risk. So we'll delay the migration another 6 months. Should not be a big cost impact, and the Coast Guard will still come up in 2020.
And Mr. Curry, very quickly, yes or no, do you believe the DHS is well positioned to spend $120 million on FSM?
The quick answer is we don't know. We haven't assessed the $120 million request, and I don't know exactly what portion of financial management modernization that's going to address. But we do know this, that some of the, like FEMA, ICE, and FEMA and ICE specifically are still not they're still in the discovery phase, which is, in financial management terms, means that they're still trying to see how long it's going to take to address these issues and what it's going to cost.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. I apologize, my time is up. I'm glad that we are now joined by Ranking Member Crenshaw. So I'll now recognize the Ranking Member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Crenshaw, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Apologies, we are double booked in hearings today and budget markups. So I appreciate y'all's patience. Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you to my colleagues for being here to address this extremely important matter. And thank you to our witnesses as well for being here, and I especially want to thank Mr. Fulgham for his years of service with DHS and for your decades of uniformed service as an Air Force officer. I and the nation are grateful for people like you who place service to country above self, and I wish you both luck in your future endeavors. This department was created from agencies and components of numerous other agencies with varied mission sets, and at times this has made it very difficult for DHS to work as a unified body. Each agency and component still has its own requirements and missions, but also must find a way to ensure the overall mission of the department is fulfilled. So today we're examining how DHS has been fulfilling its mission and the struggles it has encountered as it moves towards a unified management structure. Many large agencies have difficulties in managing acquisitions and personnel. DHS is no exception, of course. And since its creation, DHS has had difficulty with developing and following policies to prevent cost overruns and ensure that requirements are met. DHS has been taking steps to identify efficiencies and reduce duplication by looking for common requirements among the components. It has also developed specific steps that must be followed in each major acquisition. The problem seems to be oversight of these policies to ensure that appropriate action is taken when a problem is identified. So while we examine the steps DHS has taken, we should also take this opportunity to find out what we can do in Congress and in this committee to assist DHS in the problems it has been encountering with personnel procurement and acquisitions and other issues necessary for DHS to accomplish its mission. Personnel management in DHS has presented its own unique challenges. DHS consistently ranks at the bottom in terms of employee morale. And according to one federal employee viewpoint survey, DHS has typically had declining rates of satisfaction. However, in 2017, it increased by 4%, but remained level in 2018. The most recent survey shows that while 89% of employees feel their work is important, as they should, only 48% feel that poor performance is actually dealt with appropriately, and only 43% felt that senior leaders generate high levels of motivation. So DHS must figure out ways to motivate its employees, and just as, or more importantly, must be freer to hire and fire its employees in order to improve the quality of people within the department. The management of the department and the management of each component need to make it a priority to improve employee morale and treat employees fairly, while also at the same time holding substandard performers accountable. DHS also faces challenges with hiring enough people. This is seen most clearly in CBP, which struggle to hire and retain enough personnel. Congressional fixes like my Anti-Border Corruption Improvement Act and Representative Torres Small's Rural and Remote Hiring Bill are good starts to address some of these challenges. For the last several years, DHS and GSA have been developing the land at St. Elizabeth to create a consolidated headquarters for the department. The secretary and the management of the department are moving into this location this week. However, there are still a number of questions about the direction of this project in the future. At a hearing last April, the department committed to providing an updated plan for the future of St. Elizabeth by the end of 2018. This updated plan has not yet been provided, yet the budget includes a request for additional funds for this project. Since this project has been plagued with delays and cost overruns, it makes sense for the department to have a solid plan before moving forward. DHS still struggles with management of its financial systems, which has been an ongoing problem. The administration's budget includes a request to modernize the systems for certain components of the department. I look forward to hearing how this project is developing. I recognize the unique challenges this department has had to struggle with since its inception, and I commend the management for all the progress that has been made towards achieving a unified Department of Homeland Security. We must continue to improve, and as we say in the military, always work to improve our forward position. What this all comes down to is efficiency in operations and efficiency in management. While we discuss this, we should not lose sight of the fact that what is happening at the border is the opposite of efficient. That may be tough for many to hear, but it's also, this is what happens when the full strength of the Department of Homeland Security is not adequate and it cannot do its job. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today and how to address the challenges that remain. I yield back. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Nevada, Ms. Titus.
Thank you very much, and thank y'all for being here. I want to ask you about St. Elizabeth, but before I get to that, let me ask you this. Is there any money anywhere in this budget that the president can steal and use to build a wall?
We have the budget request for the wall inside our overall budget for $5 billion.
So that you can't move any of this around?
What we have is general transfer authorities provided by the Congress where we can move 5% out and 10% in, subject to congressional notification.
Okay. Do you anticipate that'll happen?
I haven't been asked to do any of that, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Well, back to St. Elizabeth's. In addition to the honor of serving on this committee, I chair the Subcommittee of Infrastructure and Transportation that oversees GSA and public buildings. So the problems at St. Elizabeth are very concerning to me. They've already been outlined, but just to put them in perspective, it's about 10 years overdue and about $1 billion overrun of cost. I'm glad to hear that the secretary is moving in there this week because we've been hearing rumors that she wasn't going to move in there until August. Also, some of the agencies that were originally intended to move there are now not going to fit. There's not going to be enough room for them to go. And some of the agencies that are now overdue to move are having to engage in some very expensive short-term leases. I would ask you if you could address that because we haven't gotten the report that was due to us 2 years ago, and I don't know if there's any plan to give us that report. I would ask you how you deal with those leases, how expensive they are because they're short-term. What about the folks who aren't going to get to move to this campus? Are they going to be nearby? How are you going to coordinate with them since coordination seems to be the biggest problem? And is there any environmental friendly lead project sustainability requirements going into any of this construction?
Okay, first and foremost, ma'am, as you said, we are moving into the center building. DHS's portion of that budget has been on budget. The plan moving forward is the 20 budget request does ask for $224 million to outfit a state-of-the-art cybersecurity facility. Given CISA's unique both IT requirements as well as security requirements, along with the fact that they're in over 8 locations and this will allow them to consolidate, makes a lot of sense to put them in federal space on the campus. That will be next, followed in all likelihood by our intelligence function, which is now sitting at the Nebraska Avenue complex. We hope to ask for funding for that in the FY21 request. That will allow us to get off of the Nebraska Avenue complex and save money there and turn that back over to GSA. As far as the report goes, you're 100% correct. It's way overdue. We had a report that was ready, but because of a couple of budget requests that didn't go through and the fact that we had a new administration and we thought requirements may change, we didn't deliver it. What I'll tell you is we have been keeping the committee updated, their staffs updated all along the way. We'll continue to do that. We have an NCR consolidation study that should complete by June. That will inform that strategy along with GSA's master plan, which is currently in the NEPA process. I believe that we should be able to give you a good preliminary assessment of what we're going to do, not only on St. Elizabeth's, but in the NCR in the July-August timeframe.
That'll give us some comparisons of what it costs to lease as well as to build and move.
That's what the report requires, yes, ma'am.
And how about the environmental qualities of the building?
The center building?
The one that's under construction.
To my knowledge, there are no issues with that building environment from an environmental perspective.
And you think it's going to be finished by 2026?
What, the entire campus? So the remainder of the campus, what we are looking to do is build 3 more buildings out there. That's what we've got an agreement to do. We don't want any more adaptive reuse because, as you said, costs too much and we lost too much square footage. Depending on the support of the Congress, I believe that we can, if we ask for the budget for INA in 21, we'd have that by 24, the final facility out there in the 22 budget request, and it would be built by 25 and 26, and that would complete what we're able to do on that campus today, short of getting folks to agree to demolish some more facilities out there and things of that nature, which takes quite a bit of time, as you well know, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. The chair recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Gentlemen, thank you for your service to your country. It's quite an endeavor. Department of Homeland Security being formed with the intent to gather the full services of so many agencies that have been existent, sometimes with very disparate cultures and backgrounds. To integrate that was a tremendous task. And Mr. Curry, you mentioned in your opening statement that a great deal of progress has been made over the course of 16 years. I support my colleagues who have mentioned that the centralized command and control of DHS, where this is an endeavor I believe should be bipartisan, and your own struggles and efforts, both you gentlemen are noted. Mr. Fogum, regarding appropriations, last month this committee marked up a bill, H.R. 1639, was my bill, that would require Customs and Border Protection Commissioner to coordinate with your office to prepare, implement, and submit to Congress workload staffing models. Staffing and appropriations therein are challenges. And the staffing models for air and marine operations and border patrol that would inform Customs and Border Protection's review and communication of staffing shortages to Congress. This bill would help Congress review CBP staffing needs so we can ensure they're properly funded to fill these important law enforcement vacancies and ensure that CBP has taken a scientific approach to assessing its resourcing needs. I ask you, sir, are you familiar with that bill? And that can be a yes or no. And could you talk about some of the factors that go into workload staffing modeling, and how could it help CBP assess its staffing needs if it had this mandated requirement?
I am familiar with the legislation. For CBP, as you stated, staffing models are extremely important. For CBPOs, we have a staffing model. It's pretty straightforward because of the type of work they do. For Border Patrol agents, It's vastly different. It's much more complex in terms of response times.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but on that point, is it a moving target, my brother? Because of what's happening on our southern border, it's quite challenging to model and predict staffing requirements, is it not? I mean, who knew 6 months ago that we'd have 76,103 interceptions in February and over 100,000 in March?
So what I'd say is the amount of staff required is a moving target, but the model itself can be done.
Exactly.
I've been briefed on the model. The model shows tremendous promise. I believe by the June-July timeframe, that model will be, at least phase one will be operational, what I would call IOC. And it will go a long way to helping the Border Patrol determine exactly what it needs to operationalize or operationally control the border.
Overall, do you concur that the scientific staffing model, like we're describing, that my legislation would call for, that this subcommittee supported, Madam Chairwoman spoke on behalf, and I thank her for that, and as well as the ranking member. Would you concur it would just help Congress get its head wrapped around with the reality of what staffing is needed, and therefore what funding is needed for that staffing?
For Border Patrol agents, absolutely, as well as the rest of the department. If I could very quickly, I would tell you that the department has, for about 65% of the workforce, a good staffing model. Once we get one for Border Patrol agents, would be up around 80%, which is...
Roger that. Quickly, in my remaining time, I want to jump to biometrics. Listen, I support the full implementation of biometrics. I think it's crucial for the security of our nation. Just, in your opinion, would authorizing the DHS Office of Biometric Identity Management help improve biometric vetting and mitigate visa overstays to help us track that?
I think what the authorization would do is give us clear authority, not just for the law enforcement aspect of identity management services, but for the broader implications that we'd like to see in the department. So, yes.
Thank you for your clarification. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And Mr. Curry, I'll have a question to submit to you in writing. So I thank you for being here today. I yield.
The chair recognizes for 5 minutes the ranking member, Gentleman Crenshaw from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you again for being here. I'd like to start off with morale and personnel issues. Mr. Curry, in your testimony, you mentioned how critical it is for DHS to increase employee engagement and morale. Can you point to any measurable approaches to how that might be done?
Yes, sir. It's a great question. We've been looking at this for years, and I know DHS has as well. So one of the things, we did a report a few years ago, and one of our recommendations is that DHS look across its components and try to identify the root causes of the morale problem. And I have to say that it's important to look within the components. Some of these components, like TSA and CBP, are massive in and of themselves. They would be their own department if compared to other departments in size. So I think you have to look at the component itself, its mission, and what drives employee engagement and the specific challenges within the component. They have done that. One of the things that's been found in some of this root cause analysis is actually that a lot of this boils back down to what you said in your opening statement. It's about supervision, leadership, trust in leadership, training and development, and do supervisors have the employees' backs in an environment of trust? That is huge. So I think there needs to be continued oversight, looking and drilling really down into some of the problem components, TSA, CBP, Secret Service, because they're very different, and they all have their own unique challenges.
And Mr. Fulgham, I'll let you expand on that if you'd like, but I want to bring up accountability. I didn't hear, I heard a lot of leadership issues, which is certainly always the case, but accountability is a big one. And when 48% of employees feel that poor performance, only 48% mean that it's believe that poor performance is dealt with appropriately, which means 52% believe that it's not. How do we deal with that? And can we look at ways to increase the ability of supervisors to fire those with cause who deserve to be, who are underperforming?
If I could, sir, I'll start with employee engagement. To Chris's point, what we've done in the department is required focused employee engagement action plans that target specific issues within the components. And then we have an ESC that the Undersecretary for Management chairs that monthly looks at how they're making progress on those plans and continue to hold them accountable, because to Chris's point, what's happening in TSA may be vastly different than what's happening in CBP. I think you also have to, once you get to that root cause, which may be retention, or it may be a hiring issue in one component versus something else in another, build a plan and hold them accountable for it. To your point, we've done a lot to look at the issue of performance and why the survey says what it does. Part of the issue, frankly, is employees, it's between the employee and the supervisor when it comes to performance and discipline in those actions.
Well, to an extent, but I mean, I've worked in federal government. You can't just fire somebody. It's not like the private sector. So there's a lengthy bureaucratic process. Is there ways to quicken that progress or that process? What can we do to help with that? I know we've taken steps in Congress to make the Veterans Affairs organization, for instance, better suited to hire and fire people quickly.
I do think you still want to give due process, but I do think there are ways to streamline the discipline process. My point only was, sir, that those discussions are between the supervisor and the employee, so you don't have a lot of visibility as to what actions are being taken with disciplinary actions. That was my only point. But yes, I think more could be done to streamline that discipline process.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I've worked in federal government. There's nothing that decreases morale more than feeling like people you work with are underperforming and cannot be held accountable for because the system just doesn't let them be held accountable. That's a major problem in all federal agencies, not just yours. Did you see, Mr. Curry, do you see any benefit, this is on we're moving to finance now, is there any benefit from moving to a single consolidated finance system for pay and benefits similar to how the DoD uses DFAS? Would that work?
Yeah, I think this issue is endemic of a lot of the challenges the department has had, and they're combining agencies that are so different and have different needs. And every time they've tried to do that in the past, to have a DHS-wide system, it's a huge challenge. And I think even their contractors, face challenges in trying to integrate all these systems to serve every component and give it what it needs. So, I think there's some benefit in consolidating some functions, but it's also a major challenge. So it can't. I don't think.
And I'd like you both to talk about this in my remaining seconds, and you can answer. But also about how the procurement innovation lab is going, and any good measurable benefits from that. Thank you, Madam Chair. See what I did there?
Thank you.
Ma'am, can I respond?
I will follow up afterwards on that. Thank you. The chair recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I'll just yield a minute to Congressman Crenshaw to follow up on his question.
So first of all, on financial systems modernization, what the department is doing is exactly what DOD did. I was there when they did it. First, you have to reduce your footprint, which is what we're doing through system consolidation, and then you can continue to further consolidate. As it relates to the Procurement Innovation Lab, absolutely 100% we're making real progress. I can give you one quick example. We had a large procurement. It typically takes us about 180 days to do. We were able to deliver capability in half that time, just by using the rules of the FAR, not by asking you for legislation, not by doing something out of the ordinary, but just using what's in the FAR and looking under every rock to see how we could do it differently. It is 100% absolutely working, and it's becoming a best practice in the federal government.
Thank you. So just to follow up with that, so the Innovation Lab and that acquisition, so that's just acquiring existing off-the-shelf technology, or is that trying to develop new technology that's specific to DHS's missions?
So it could be either or, sir. So it could be that we're looking to develop something new, or it could be looking to develop something off the shelf, depending on what our alternatives analysis tells us.
And then can you speak a little bit more? I know Congressman Crenshaw asked you about the financial system, and you spoke a little bit earlier, but can you just take me more through? I mean, it looks like you're asking for $120 million to modernize your financial systems. And then can you speak to what you're doing, what that will look like? And then I know it's had some problems. Can you speak to how you're going to avoid those?
So I'll start with what we're doing with, or what we'd like to do with $120 million. The $120 million will finish the consolidation of Coast Guard, CWMD, and TSA, as well as begin the effort to modernize FEMA's systems that Chris referenced earlier. And so that's what the money will do in that regard. As far as what lessons we learned and what we've done about it, what we saw in the IBC experience was simply there were too many folks between us and the folks actually doing the work. So we had requirements, but we had to go through IBC, who then went through their integrator contractor, who then went to the software provider. We now have very clear lines of communication, strong oversight and governance. I meet with those folks once a week myself. They brief me on where this program is and how it's going. I meet with all stakeholders, which includes our integrator as well as the software provider monthly to make sure that we're all staying on the same
Who are
page.
some of these contractors?
I'm sorry?
Who has some of these contracts? Can you give me an idea of who the companies that are
So
there?
our integrator is IBM and the software provider is Oracle.
Keep going.
That's it.
All right. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. We'll do a second round if folks are interested. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. So I want to pick up where Ranking Member Crenshaw left off in terms of morale. I appreciate some of the concepts that you're talking about in terms of action plans, but I'd be very interested to hear more about the resources that are needed for the work of increasing morale. So has the department requested resources in its FY 2020 budget to specifically address these systemic morale issues that have plagued the department's workforce since its inception?
I believe so, yes, ma'am. One of the key aspects that we've uncovered in our analysis is it's not just about the employee, it's about the family members. So one of the things that's in not only management's budget request, it's very modest, but in other components as well, is this idea of the elements of family readiness that we like to focus on. One is reducing general stress in the workplace. Two is childcare. Childcare and dependent care is a big issue with many folks. So one of the things that we are exploring is this idea of off-duty care and partnering with organizations like FAA who have these type facilities for a pretty modest investment. We could join them and provide some of that care that folks need that work these off-duty hours. There's subsidized childcare in the Secret Service budget as well as a couple of others, I believe. And then the other thing that we learned, one of the things that reinforced what we thought we already knew during the shutdown was financial literacy. Folks are really struggling. It's another contributor to stress. So we have a campaign underway to educate folks about what tools are out there, what resources are out there to help them adequately manage their resources.
And in DHS, you have a lot of employees who are operating in surprisingly rural areas. I'm thinking of Border Patrol, specifically Customs. Are you taking that into account when you're talking about morale?
So I think targeted retention, targeted recruiting incentives are something that certainly the Border Patrol's looked at. The mobility program, which I'm sure you're familiar with, ma'am, is working well, and there's money in the budget for that as well.
Great. Just following up another conversation that we're all interested in is IT and cybersecurity. And I understand that DHS hasn't reported to Congress or OPM on department-wide cybersecurity areas of critical needs as required by law. Will the DHS be reporting that information soon? And is there anything we can do to help with that reporting? And this is something Ranking Member Crenshaw is also very interested in.
So, ma'am, I believe you're referring to some of the work that GAO has done, reference the coding of positions. So we coded those positions down to the NIST standard in terms of 2 digits. Then we've actually coded them down now to 3 digits as required, but there's still some cleanup to do. So I think from that regard, we're in good shape.
Just quickly, in my remaining time, I would love to touch base on on diversity and inclusion and that strategic plan. In its requested budget for FY 2020, has the department allocated funds to develop either an updated strategy or programs directed to ensuring it has a diverse and inclusive workforce?
So we have a diversity and inclusion strategic plan and an operating plan that goes with it. It's one of our 6 priorities within the human capital line of business. We do have resources requested to make sure that we can continue the hiring events like we've done in the past that target women in law enforcement and other diverse needs of the department. So yes, ma'am.
So if I may, that plan was written in 2012. Are there any, or is there a more recent one?
Yes, ma'am. We'll make
Okay.
sure you get it.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'll yield my time now, and I'll recognize for 5 minutes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Gentlemen, let's speak candidly about morale. It's been brought up several times here, specifically regarding Customs and Border Patrol, and I encourage you each to consider your response to this query here. Is there ever a day when those men and women can just chill out at work? Every day is a fire zone, is it not?
It's an extremely challenging environment.
Extremely challenging climate would be a very politically correct way to quantify it. Our congressional staffs here have incredibly busy days, and then we have less stressful days, Madam Chairwoman. The most difficult days and challenging for all of us are when we have overlapping congressional obligations, committee hearings, important votes, floor speeches, many meetings with constituents. Some weeks are just incredibly challenging. And then we have our district work weeks, and our congressional staff here in D.C., you know, they get to catch up. You get to catch up a little bit. They get to breathe. This never happens with Customs and Border Patrol now. Their families suffer because, talk about morale, you have to understand camaraderie and esprit de corps. And when a unit is pushed beyond its capabilities, its structural ability to perform its mission, then every man and every woman feels responsible to their brother and their sister to be there. So things like family vacations, family leave, are you finding, gentlemen, at Customs and Border Patrol taking their vacations and their family leave?
I don't have the specific stats on what vacation
Sure
days they're
opinion.
using, but I can tell you that they are stretched, as the Secretary has said, and they're working incredibly hard each and every day to get their jobs done.
Mr. Curry, you concur that there's a sense of responsibility amongst these American men and women, these patriots that have been tasked with securing our southern border and our ports of entry and areas between our ports of entry. And they're facing human tragedy every day in wave after wave after wave, and they feel responsible to each other. So it's our duty, it's our responsibility, Madam Chairwoman. I say so with deep respect for you and my colleagues here. It's our responsibility to provide these men and women with the resources that they have told us they need to perform their mission, so that they can develop a morale within a reasonable framework of what's expected of any human being to perform. My wife works for a large corporation, and I can tell you payroll days, those few days, man, that's stress. And I just think of it, every day would be payroll for my wife if you compare it with Customs and Border Patrol. Every day for our staff here in D.C. would be a day where we have 3 or 4 committee hearings and many constituent meetings and important votes on the floor and floor speeches to make and events to attend. These men, of course, their morale is suffering because it's not because of them, it's because of us. It's up to us to make this correction. I thank you for the second round of questioning. I very much admire the candor that these gentlemen have displayed today. to be commended for appearing before this subcommittee. And Madam Chairwoman, I think you're doing a wonderful job, and you're in service for our country. And I feel great promise for this subcommittee that we can get things done. I hope we can just keep our eyes on the truth and drive forward despite any political or ideological barriers. And I yield.
I think we might be concluding here, and I just deeply appreciate your time and, in addition, your candor, your clear-eyed vision of improvement. So thank you for your valuable testimony, and the members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for the witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objection, the committee record shall be kept open for 10 days. Hearing no further business, the subcommittee stands adjourned.